Hi guys, before we start today, I wanted to let you know that I have finished my book, Myths of Outdoor Play and Learning, breaking down barriers that keep parents and teachers indoors. This is a book where I've compiled all of the ideas and the conversations that I regularly have with teachers. Things like foraging is dangerous, or setting up an outdoor space takes ages, or my personal favourite chapter in this book, behaviour management is harder outdoors. And in this book, I've unpicked all of those ideas so that hopefully anybody who's a bit reluctant or not quite sure about taking play and learning outside can read this book and can really be convinced to give it a go. You can find the book right now on Amazon. It's The Myths of Outdoor Play and Learning by Lewis Ames.
You're listening to the Forest School podcast with Lewis Ames and Gemma Southerden.
I know.
Although I just put a sweet in my mouth, which is not professional, is it?
Well, no, we've got to balance it out somewhere. My wife and I sometimes have conversations where my whole adult life has been a balancing act, appearance-wise, between part of me being incredibly scruffy, and so I have to balance it somewhere else. So I had about 10 years where I had really long dreadlocks, and they were big, and some of them were huge. And so to counter, if you look at pictures of me with massive dreads, I wore button-up flannel shirts, and I wore them because I was like, I have to counteract this, my hair, with like smartness, and then it's like, oh, I have to have like a neat haircut to counteract the fact that I now look really grubby and.
So now you're a skinhead and really grubby.
Yeah.
Definite counteract.
I wouldn't define myself as a skinhead, but yes. Yes, I've lost my hair. Thank you.
Sorry.
I've got male pattern baldness. I'm not part of a racist organisation.
Just to clarify.
There's a slight difference. Right. I can't help my hair falling out.
No, but you have a close hair shaved cut style thing as well.
Yes, because if I let it go, then you can see how big the difference is between the sides of my hair and the top of my hair.
Some people embrace that. Just saying.
Sure.
Choice.
Okay. Well, when your hair goes, we can talk.
Yeah.
I'll lend you some clippers.
Do it. Shave it all off.
We're on separate microphones.
Yeah, I hope this works.
Which people might be able to tell. They might be like, oh my God, this sounds like a clear, crisp, professional recording. Also, we're outside and we've set up a table in the sunshine. And you can probably hear that my nose is plugged with hay fever.
I might sniff quite a lot.
You enjoying
really
that?
nice, isn't
Everybody enjoying that?
We're talking about woodwork today.
Yeah.
Talking about woodwork and woodwork at Forest School. And I want to start off by asking you a question, Lewis. Okay. So before Forest School was a part of your even like awareness, what is your experience of woodwork? So I'm talking school, I'm talking like at home, in the world, on a school trip, anything.
Well, I mean, you've opened up a wound here, so I'm really sorry.
No.
But I'm going to tell you.
Is this healing? Is this healing work that we're doing right now?
Anybody that knows me already knows this story, because if woodworking comes up, this story comes out. So the biggest memory of woodworking at school is doing a GCSE in resistant materials.
Right.
And, as at that age, you're like in everybody's business. So you know what your mates are doing for their project, you know what you're doing for yours. And I did not get on well with the DT teacher because I had started to dreadlock my hair and do all things that he had to put into that. Didn't like me. But I remember that the DT GCSE being 90 to 95% based on your coursework, the like design process, and at the end of it, it was like, whatever.
That's talked about quite a lot in one of the books that I want to talk about.
Cool. So, the trauma for me was that I hate admin-y work.
Who enjoys that?
It's the rubbish where they would go in school. They go, so pick what you're going to make and then pretend that you had 4 or 5 other ideas and write about those as if they were serious. And I go, you've met me. I have an idea and I just do the thing. And then I'll look back and go, probably should have had a thought about that. But the result was that I made a fully working bass guitar I bought some pieces, but I made the body and I wired all the electronics, made a fully working guitar, and I got a C for the GCSE. My friend made a wooden box with a velvet line for his drumsticks, and he got an A star.
Yeah.
Because he'd made a box with a hinge.
Yeah.
But his coursework, he did art GCSE. His coursework was immaculate, and it was, his handwriting's lovely, and he'd written loads of stuff, and he'd done what the teacher asked.
Yeah.
Like a real swot.
Yeah.
Sam Naylor, right? Sam Naylor.
What Sam Naylor's doing now? Sam Naylor.
Sam Naylor's a
woodworker.
doctor now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he got an art scholarship, and then he went, no, I think I'm going to go to medical school instead. You know who you are, Sam Naylor.
Applications for Forest School training are now open at childrenoftheforest.com. Check out the podcast links for more details.
What's
That's
your experience of
interesting.
woodworking from school? Now that my trauma's out.
Okay, so I have not quite as deep a trauma there, but I had Mr. Jenkins, who had been teaching woodwork for a gabillion years, taught my parents, taught me, and he just had that real, like, that kind of teacher with that sense of humour that's just like, I'm going to pick on this person and everyone's going to kind of laugh, and I'm going to be really dry, very,
Right.
very dry, very
Deadpan.
someone who will send you off to the corner of the workshop for some elbow grease. That kind of
Okay.
person,
Right.
And we were doing boxes, pencil cases, rectangular pencil cases with a nail in the corner of the lid so that it would swing open.
Oh,
type
okay.
thing. Or a screw, I can't remember, whatever. And he was talking about angles, so cutting the angles. This is quite hard to explain on a podcast. So that they're so you've got the side of the pencil box, and you're cutting
45 degrees,
Yes.
so that it makes a 90-degree
Exactly.
right angle.
Exactly. And I cut the angles so that they were facing the same way.
Oh,
Like a
okay.
parallelogram. He
Yeah.
looked at it from above. And so then he made an example of me and went, everyone stop, look at this.
Oh, you hadn't turned one of the pieces of wood over to make
so
them up. Okay.
I just did them. So he was like, anyone see the problem here? And I couldn't see the problem. I was just like, what? I've done the angle correctly. I've measured the angle. I've done it in pencil. Blah, blah, blah. So that was my kind of traumatic memory. And then like a little bit of stuff at home, just making things that I wanted to play with, So
Right.
getting my dad to help make a kind of box for doll's housey type play. And I think that's about it. And being fascinated by my uncle. I was talking yesterday with one of our kids about my uncle's whittling skills. Oh my gosh, he had on a shelf a wooden linked chain that he had whittled. So he
That's
whittled
mesmerising, that
the
stuff.
chain links, and then on the end of the chain there was a kind of rectangular cage with a spherical ball inside.
Yeah.
And I just remember being really little and just going, you
How
made
did you
that.
put the thing in
How
the
did you
thing?
do it? How?
Yeah.
So yeah.
It can be very mesmerising, can't it? Woodworking in general, when it's done well, I really enjoy. So Japanese carpentry has no nails, no glue, and it's all kind of like people here might know about dovetails, which is one type of joint, but Japanese carpentry has this piece works into this piece from this angle, and this one comes up at 90 degrees. And not only that, so you go together, you can't see any joins. Not only that, but it's all designed to be and when the wood shrinks, this
that's the
joint
thing.
gets tighter.
Yeah.
And it's just
It's
so
like oak
satisfying.
frame buildings that our friend does. and
joyful.
You see the pictures of his structures, you're like, wow, amazing. Yeah. A friend of mine just started wood turning and explained about turning a wooden bowl, and then you have to leave it for a certain amount of time because then the wood will shrink, and then you'll see if it's going to crack or whether it's going to kind of,
Be a bowl.
yeah, suck itself into some kind of shape. It's really cool. But yeah, it's kind of been, I don't know why woodwork's been on my radar recently, but I've kind of thought about the groups that we've got at the moment and thinking, because this time, not this time last year, but this kind of time after lockdown 1, when our groups restarted, they had a real fascination with clay. Do you remember? And they were mining the clay and processing the clay, making stuff, finding stuff, and it became a real project that everyone sort of was involved in some capacity.
Yeah.
And it was week after week after week. And I was just kind of thinking about what if there was going to be an equivalent after this lockdown,
Okay.
and the group coming back and kind of fixing on to something as a sort of like ongoing project and ongoing interest that might inspire the whole group. And kind of thought, well, I want to be able to not tell them what that's going to be, but facilitate and
have something in the Rolodex.
Have some Rolodex ideas, have some invitations, and just be ready to provide for that. And I was sort of thinking about, what is a bit like clay in terms of what it's offering. So it's offering handwork, that's quite like sensory and quite therapeutic, and it can carry on going. You can do like a little bit for a while and then walk away. It's not like you have to stay there and finish this project for a certain amount of time. You can just do a little bit, come back to it, whatever. It's got lots of like steps and stages to it, so that if you don't want to be digging today, you can be sitting quietly and blah blah. And I kind of thought, well, actually woodwork has got a lot of similar qualities in that way. So I thought, right, I'm just going to do a bit of reading about it and a little bit of thinking, and make sure that we have all of the tools in the cabin that we need to facilitate this kind of like easily accessible, child-friendly woodwork stuff. And haven't quite launched it yet. Haven't launched this idea in terms of launching is the wrong word, but I haven't quite got the tools out and left them
springboarded it.
Yeah, springboarded. I was going to say left the tools lying around.
Sprungboarded.
That's not what I would do, listeners. I wouldn't like just get out some saws and just leave them on the table and go, hey kids, here's a play invitation, play with the saw.
No, we hide the saws around the woods
and then they have
say,
to find
guys,
you
any fun?
You do something about that the other day.
What was I reading?
Sabotage, and the game is sabotage the project.
I was reading a thing
Among
about
Us.
people playing Among Us in forest school, which is a great thing, because it's lots of children's special interests. For those of you who don't know, it's one of those games. It's a bit like Wink Murder, but more complicated. So you're trying to go around and complete tasks, and one person is the murderer trying to stop them. And so someone had made it a forest school game and gone, the tasks that they have to complete are... And there were some that I thought were okay, like build a tower out of bricks. It was, collect a bucket of clay and stuff that so then the idea is that the murderer can go around and sort of sabotage these things. They could hide the bucket, or they could knock over the tower after someone's done it, whatever. But one of the tasks was cut 5 pieces of kindling or something. And I just was like, I don't want kids like sneaking up behind each other while they're cutting wood to like tap them on the head and be like, you've been murdered, which like...
No.
It just needed
not a great idea.
Slightly tweaking maybe that one idea.
Yeah.
When you think about woodworking compared to clay, my immediate sort of distinction is that woodworking more often needs more adult support, intervention, scaffolding than clay. Yes. Which is just because it often involves tools which carry a greater risk than clay. Yep. But also, I think woodworking, you could sort of divide it into... it's probably a Venn diagram with 2 circles. There's probably a very small overlap between projects which require lots of steps and time. It's cut these pieces, measure this. It's got a long, lengthy process. You've got to have some real sort of perseverance and long-term understanding to go... Cutting 19 pieces of wood might not be the most exciting thing, but I'm gonna make a go-kart. Yeah. Whereas kids would just go, can we make a go-kart today? And when you explain the steps, it becomes boring. And then in the other circle, I think you have the craptivity type of woodworking things.
I so want to talk about craptivities.
Craptivities and woodworking are just that thing where it's like... And then... craptivity is if you made all the kids do the same thing. If you have one child and they cut a wood cookie and they put 2 nails in it and they go, it's Shrek. In the side, and they go, that's Shrek. We're not by any stretch saying that's a craptivity. The craptivity comes when you make everybody have a wood cookie and everybody has to put 2 nails in.
Today we are making blah.
So let's just, as a caveat to anybody that's going like, whoa, I've got, that project on its own is not a craptivity.
I had thought about craptivities when I was driving
go for
here.
it.
And I was like, why do they exist? Why do craptivities exist? And apart from the reasons that... We talked about this a while ago, didn't we? But not on a podcast that we've released, so it's confusing. So I try not to repeat myself too much. But I had a thought that... Let me try and phrase this right. So I would say craptivities begin in early years, and they begin in...
That's a book title. Craptivities begin in early years.
Whether that be kindergarten, nursery, preschool, or toddler group.
Yep.
baby group even, you know.
Sensory groups, I've seen them in.
Dip your hand in the paint, make a handprint.
Not even in baby groups. What? Oh no, go on.
La la la. And I wonder whether... So, as you can tell, listeners, we don't like activities, we don't think they're good. But I think the reason they happen is because if you've got older kids and you've got some stuff, like some art equipment, some textiles we had out this week, didn't we, on the table, wool, older kids are able, because they are physically and mentally able to manipulate things and turn something from an idea in their head into an idea in their hands, to whatever extent, but they're growing in capability in that regard.
Yeah.
That they can do that and come up with something that is a thing. Even
independently, or you mean just at all?
Kind of independently.
Okay.
So you could leave some stuff out and something would happen with it. And it might be something that you as an adult, with your adult view of the world, recognises as a useful or artistic or beneficial thing. Because
there's air quotes going on there, but you can't see them.
I'm air quoting. They've made a thing, and I as an adult go, that is good because you have made a thing. This is how I see the world in terms of like useful items and useful skills, and you know, back in the day you have made a thing and it is useful for the community, or you can sell that thing, or you can use it, or whatever. Whereas little children don't have that capability yet.
Nothing they make is valuable.
Exactly. To us.
To society. To anything. It's trying to make a product out of something that's purely a process.
Yes. So, and we find that really uncomfortable because we cannot remember what it's like to be 18 months old and to play with wool or clay or paint or anything like that. We can't remember what is happening. We can't see any of the process. We just see a mess with no end result. And so we go, I can't deal with that. This is so abstract to me and so uncomfortable, and I can't engage in it, that I will make the child make a thing, make a craftivity. So it is completely, like, we already knew that it was top down and adult led, like the craftivity thing, but I wondered whether that's where it comes from. And it starts in early years because it's like, I can't call, I've got no name for that.
It's also like a shorthand for the hard bit would be to observe learning as it happens for 30 children. That is, you know, capture in the moment candid photos or video or something, and then try and process all that information, and all, rather than going, here is a piece of paper, and on this piece of paper I can see the end results of, you know, fingerprinting and understanding this and combining materials and you know, mixing media, so I can tick that off. I don't have to wade through a 20-minute video of going, why is he picking his nose now? Why is he doing that? He's not at the table. He's running around. Why is he going to the loo again? Like, that's really hard to build evidence from.
He's asked me to get it all out again when I've just put it all away because they weren't doing anything with it.
He's putting his finger
on
someone else's. They weren't
interested in it, so I packed it away, and now they want it out again.
It came up to me yesterday. I put away a rope that was just tied to a tree. No one was near it. No one. I watched it for about 20 minutes just to go, what's that rope doing there? Someone then came up to me later and she went, where's that rope that was tied to that tree around the branch? I went, oh, I put it away. No one was using it. I was just planning on coming back to that after I did. Like, well, I didn't know that, did I?
Yeah, that started in the morning, and then
Yeah. So sorry to go back. So I think there's the differentiation between craftivities and very long-term projects,
and also springboards,
which is
a whole another thing.
So, but there's also something about woodworking I think comparing it to clay is very useful in that it's a lot more permanent, the changes you make. If you stuff up your clay pot, punch, the clay's back down.
Yeah.
You move the child that you've been punching, and you make the clay back into a pot. But woodworking is like, you've cut that. It's the whole thing is slower. You've got to measure. You've got to cut. You don't have to measure. I mean, a lot of stuff we've done has been eyeballed. But you know, it's a much. Maybe there's a higher barrier to entry. Maybe that's a way of phrasing it.
I think there is, but I think that sometimes we think there is for an adult perspective, because you are even the word woodwork implies that there is some kind of finished product, whereas if you kind of skew it and think, so I've just been reading Learning Through Woodwork by Pete Morehouse, which is early years focused, but I think is very forest school friendly for that reason. Right. In the same way that early years practice is more play based, more child led, a lot of the time you think that it kind of correlates with forest school a lot more.
Yeah.
So a lot of the stuff that mostly it's loads and loads of theory. This isn't like, there's loads of kind of...
It's not an activities book.
No, it's not an activities book. There are a few suggested things, but they're quite open-ended. It's like sculptures.
Right.
You know, here's some sculptures that we made. These are the things that I
very
did
much
beforehand.
springboards rather than
and here are the pieces that I cut beforehand. These are the things that you as an adult might want to prep, all that kind of stuff. And here's how you introduce tools. Here are the tools that I always say you should have. And so even though it's early years focused, I think therefore a lot of the tools and practical stuff that he's suggesting is therefore is more, so say you've got a 12-year-old, using the kind of strategies that he's talking about using are beneficial for that 12-year-old to be able to work more independently.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, they could wield a heavier hammer, but if they've got a stubby little hammer, that's going to be even easier for them to access it.
Got you.
And that if you remove the idea of an end product and focus more on the process and look at the kind of sensory side of things. So drilling, for example, like every time we do
drilling is great.
You know, there will be like a thing that is being made, like a boat or whatever. Oh, you want to make it? Okay, cool. So let's, we're drilling a hole in the middle for the mast to go in.
Yeah.
And almost half the kids will just want to drill like loads of holes.
Yeah.
Just for the sake of drilling a hole, like that mastery play element of it. And same with banging in nails, like just banging nails into something is just so bloody satisfying and sensory.
And that's a lot easier to facilitate in a when it's just me and you and a group. Mm-hmm. It's much harder to facilitate, I think, with like a group where there's families or toddlers, because there is that social pressure of like it's harder you've got to be really ballsy to stand up and go, here's some wood and some drills if you want to drill holes in it.
Yeah, because the adults are there and they're looking for I know,
but it should be perfectly valid, perfectly like, here's a thing. You're not even going to get, you don't get to take the wood home if you don't want to, or do whatever else. It's just like, here it is.
Yeah.
But then you get that bit where, if you go, I don't know, we're making wood cookies and we're putting holes on them to put the string through, and then the kid wants to drill a second hole, and you get an adult that's not you or I go, we don't need to drill more than one hole. You have to kind of lean in and go, they can drill more than one hole if they want to.
Completely. And that's the thing, isn't it? You go, so in a toddler group, you might go, I thought we might make some boats today. I'm not going to tell you exactly how to make a boat, but I'm going to do mine like this, whatever, and I've got the equipment to make that thing. Yeah. And that when a kid goes off-piste and starts just revelling in that play element of it, that's when you do have the quiet word if the parent isn't, like, if it's confusing for the parent or they're trying to
and sometimes we just lack the vocabulary. So we're going to make something with the wood, being the verb, which then conjures up these images of like the final product. But if you say, which you and I use quite a lot, there's some drills up there that we might have a play with. Play to lots of people infers that we have not risk assessed this or put anything, it implies like, just play with them. More down that like adventure playground kind of like free for all. It sounds riskier, like you go, children shouldn't play with drills, and you're like, okay, but we need a different word. Explore. I don't know what the word, is it experiment with? Does that make people feel more comfortable? Is it? But we need a word that isn't product focused.
Tinker.
And
Pete Morehouse uses that in the book, tinkering, and he talks about how sometimes that word has like negative connotations, but he's like, no, like reclaim that, embrace it as a word, because that is what we're doing, and that's the joy. Like, at the beginning it talks about it. I'd really recommend this book for anyone doing their level 3, all that stuff in your level 3 where you are talking about like child development and different theories of learning and the kind of background to forest school. So there's some stuff in here about Sloyd, there's some stuff about development of kindergartens, all that kind of stuff as a kind of background to experiential learning, to handcraft stuff with young children. So and obviously talking about like the risk assessment side of things and how our society has gone down this route of like, oh no, that's too risky, don't do that anymore, don't do that. And exactly what you described about your resistant materials thing, he talks about the shame that physical experiences in secondary school and primary school are on the decline, and the whole like design element of it, drawing the borders, right? Do you remember drawing borders? Did you have to do that? A3 landscape bits of paper, draw the border and colour it in, and it has to be the same on all of your pieces, and like, you know, because that design and invention kind of element was seen as more valuable to our economy at the time. So in the 90s, it's like, right, okay, get rid of, so 80s is more, you know, experiential, hands-on, making stuff risky, but it's on the decline. And then 90s is like, right, okay, look at the jobs we need, look at the things we need to train people in. It's all about design, concepts, all of this. And
is that why everybody works in graphic design now?
Yes, graphic design became the thing. And so the value that was seen in physically sawing up the wood, whatever, it's just like, oh, that's by the by. That's a byproduct, like your friend getting the A or whatever. It's not really about the end product. It's about like the thought, the intellectualization of the whole experience.
Yeah.
And he says what a shame that is, and how you're denying young people of the absolute joy.
Well, it also takes a lot of like
crafting.
If we talk about woodworking in a sort of discovery learning lens, doing all, for me particularly, and I imagine I'm not unique in this, but for me, having to write 20 something pages of design was time that I almost would have gone, I want to make 4 guitars because the 4th one will be better. Don't make me design, because I can't write 20 pages and that results in a better guitar, but I can make 4 guitars and that will result in a better guitar.
Absolutely. Well,
for me, that's how you get a better thing.
Isn't it? It's very adulterating because the adult way of learning might be to sit still and think about the whole process, maybe take some notes and think about what the end result might be, and then go, oh, actually, no, that won't work. Back to the drawing board, literally. I will sketch it again and I'll think about that would. But you can only do that once you've reached a certain level of experience.
There's something though, which, again, I'm going to compare it to clay, which is that if you work with some clay, you make a work. You know, there's that story, isn't there? It's like one group of art students was told to make 1 pot over a month, and another group were told to make 30. And the group that have to make a pot every day, the end result is a better pot than the students that have spent all day making 1. But with clay, your mistakes are still like, it's just a thing. So it's like, oh right, we'll smash this up and it makes grog, or we haven't fired it yet. I'm just going to let whatever that is go past.
Someone having a lot of fun.
I wondered if it was the moped, the dirt bike gang again.
Oh, right.
But when you make something out of wood, and we have this here, you end up with like an ever-increasing box of bits of crap wood with nails sticking in them that you don't end up with clay or stuff that's paint. Oh, okay, we can scratch it up, it goes in the recycling. Or bits of clay, you can move this and do whatever. But the result, I was going to say the product. The result of playing and experimenting with tools is like this janky, gnarly looking thing that looks like you've tried to make like a Mad Max weapon. and you're looking at it like, the shit is this?
I want to take this home because it is a weapon.
Yeah.
I deliberately shoved all the nails through.
I think if I hit the nails through, they'll stick out the other side, and that will be more effective.
When I attack my brother with it, then it's going to be really effective.
Find out about CPD courses at childrenoftheforest.com. Check out the podcast links for more details.
But that's the thing, isn't it? You end up with, and we've had that thing where you go, we can't put this in we can't burn it for firewood because it's covered in nails. Well, what do you do with it then? You can't forever have this piece of wood.
And I have been in my little thinking about whether woodwork might take off as a project. Been thinking about where do you store these things and how do you name them, remember whose that was, and maybe they literally did it for a couple of hours one day and they never want to see it again, but you want to store it just in case they do want to do the next bit, because they tell you when they want to do the next bit. So where do you store those, how do you label them, and then whether you talk with the learners about the process, because you kind of don't want to stop them doing it by going, oh, if you just ram loads and loads of nails in that, it's going to make that wood really hard to look after, because then it just kills the joy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But to be able to talk about resources, which is another topic entirely, isn't it?
Yeah.
About sustainably using resources, and whether just when someone's whittling at the moment, we're with a group that's getting more and more experienced at woodwork. So for a lot of the children, I feel comfortable that they can whittle, and I'm here, but I'm here in the woodwork area and I'm sharpening the knives. So that's just an ongoing maintenance thing that I can do while they're doing that.
Yeah.
And kind of maybe talking through with the children about things you can do to a discarded project. About like, well, while you're doing that, I'm going to sit here with you and I'm going to be pulling the nails out or unscrewing the screws.
Some children will take immense joy in pulling nails out.
Exactly. And you're kind of modelling it and going, well, that's what I'm going to do in order so that we can keep on doing this, rather than we're just going to like completely use up all these resources and end up with something, as you say, that's like mixed media and therefore really hard to recycle. That you do what you can in order to get the nails out. Can we use them again? Oh no, they're too bent. And then the children are seeing you doing that and you're talking through what you're doing.
Yeah.
And so there's an awareness there again of like, oh, well, if I do deliberately bend the nail, that might be what I need to do for this project, and that's fine. But if I'm doing it and I now know that means that nail can't be reused, then maybe I'm having a little bit more like consideration of it if I want to.
Yeah.
And that's kind of modelling good practice and sustainability. I think that's how I would be approaching it if it takes off here.
Yeah. That's a very good.
Yeah. And
very positive way to look at that.
Having some kind of box for projects. We've got these big black metal boxes, and I'm at the moment I'm just like, just buy more boxes. Cover the entire woods in like these boxes, so that you can kind of label things and chuck them in there.
You end up with such a level of detritus though, and stuff that doesn't, I think some of my favourite projects here have been big projects that become that are like authentically useful. So part of like building that community gratitude, we're all part of the woods. A child a few years ago built a bench, like built a like a fully we drilled legs and we then carved down the leg posts and and knocked them in and did all those things. And it's a useful bench. It's still over there. It's lasted a huge amount of time. It was a very, it was 1-to-1 every afternoon for I think about a month. Yeah. Basically spent about an hour with this child. So the product was really good at the end of it. And when I say 1-to-1, I don't mean like I did the drilling. Like they did the drilling, they did all the stuff, but it needed me there with them.
Yeah.
But at the end of it, there was this enormous sense of pride that came from having made this very useful thing. Yeah. Which was just, that's a memory that sticks out to me as a really good project, I think.
Yeah.
But hard to replicate.
Yes. Well, it was sparked by that child's interest, and it was just an interest for them. Nobody else at that time was interested in doing anything like that, were they? So that's a very learner-led project that you couldn't have planned. You couldn't go, hey everyone, we're going to make benches now.
Yeah.
That was them. I've had some really good sessions, often with children that I don't necessarily know that well. So like if you're done a holiday club with a bunch of kids that don't know each other, or working with a school group, where I have kind of made quite an adult-led like play invitation in terms of, I've got these creatures here. And I've even done this with like year sixes, and I've had like a Ninja Turtle action figure thing and like a stuffed animal and that kind of thing, and but they can't move, and how can we fix that problem for them? And so they've ended up like making vehicles. I haven't dictated what kind of vehicle, so some people have just like made a really simple like sledge and done like wood and drill a hole and tie knots with rope and things like that, and other people have made like intricate like wheels. They want the wheels to turn, all that kind of thing, and that has been a real like small world play meets woodwork meets problem solving meets all those kind of things going on, and that has really captured some children's attention for a very long time, and has been really lovely.
It's been an interesting one for me. I was trying to think of like what tools. So I didn't want to teach anyone to suck eggs, right? So I'm not here to go like, hey, has anyone thought of a bow saw? Because like hopefully most people know what a bow saw is, or it's one of the things that gets covered in your level 3. So I was trying to think of like what weird things do I think are very, very useful. And my tent pegs are surprisingly useful for lots of woodworking things. Bench vices are an absolute game changer. There's so many books and projects that involve kind of like, oh, if only I could do a cut in this direction, or if only I could drill whilst like putting my hand completely over the wood. And just a bench vise just takes so much out of that to just go, stick it in the vise then, and then, oh, okay, cool. Completely facilitates like much more independent woodworking.
Yes. What's the one that I bought more recently, which is the type of clamp that
like a C clamp.
Is it a C clamp?
Yeah.
But it's nicer than the ones with just that's a G clamp.
That's a G clamp.
Okay. So it's the type of clamp where you can clamp a smaller thing.
You like
a
pump
stick.
it up, don't you? And
yes.
then you go pump, and it goes clamp.
The stick, for example, to the surface of the table.
Yeah.
So if you want to drill a small hole through a small stick, it will,
hold it in place.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like those, and you're right. Those moments where someone's got an idea about doing something, and they talk it through with you, and you're like, how are you going to do that safely? And I just don't think I've got the equipment to
and you and I are
facilitate that.
I think the thing is that you and I are openly not super proficient whittlers. I don't think, you are very good at spoons, but neither of us like whittle loads as a hobby. It's not a skill we have. So there might be some people who would feel comfortable teaching their children, like a cut against the chest, or to teach, For me, I don't understand it enough, so I wouldn't teach it. I might do in the future. Maybe I'll, go on some more courses and stuff. But for me at the moment, a bench vise is an easy way to kind of go, do that thing.
Yeah.
And then the other one I was going to say that I think that we've discovered recently, but is really good, is augers, not drill bits. Mm-hmm. So drill bits, you've got wood drill bits and masonry drill bits, and we always find the masonry one because you find that child that's been drilling into wood cookie.
Nothing's
so
happening.
Masonry ones are like rounded at the end, and wood drill bits have got the two spikes, or sort of three spikes. But augers are often much bigger. So they make bigger holes, which is a lot more satisfying. You see the shaving coming out of an auger. But also I really like that they have, most of them, a little screw on the end that pulls it into the wood. So sometimes with a drill bit, you could get that thing where it jumps, or they're trying to drill and it goes off to the side, an angle, and then but the meaning that you can go with that almost, I'll put the screw bit in, and then you just keep moving it around and it pulls itself through the wood. It's very satisfying. I would recommend sets of augers for everybody.
I love hand drills. I just love them, and I love older ones that you get off eBay or from like a car boot sale or something, and getting a range of ones. So we've got ones with like 3 different handles. So a handle on the top, the handle that you turn, and then a handle on the side.
They look like an old whisk.
Yeah, so you can like choose where you hold it, and then you can also give different levels of help as an adult or another person if you're working in a pair. And then we've got ones that have got like just a handle on the top that is kind of like a moulded handle all the way around rather than just a stalk. And
it's metal, isn't it? It's all encased and covered. And
some are all encased, which is, if you're thinking about like hair dangling in or that kind of thing, or fingers getting caught, then that's safer. But then you've got some that are open, so then you can see the mechanisation of it, and some children being absolutely fascinated by that, just looking at it and going, oh, I've just worked out how this works, this is turning this, and you're just like, I couldn't teach a science or
it would take ages
lesson like that. It's just using the thing and just looking at it. I love them, and I love how kind of that's a tool we're with a group at the moment. For the first time someone said, oh, can I have a drill? And I was like, yeah, there you go, and just use it. Like, they were there, I could still see them, but I wasn't like hovering over them. They were old enough, were experienced enough to use that tool independently and safely, and I'm right here if anything happens, but I didn't need to be standing over them going, remember always and I didn't even really know what they were doing with it. They were just like, I need to make a hole in something. Like, yeah, okay. And that was just like, lovely moment, really nice, love it.
There's been some interesting examples of we talk sometimes about like the process of like de-schooling that goes on, or behaviour managementing, or adapting to our community and our ethos, which some children come from like a very schooly thing, and then they come here and it's like, whoa, you mean I can choose where I sit? And we're like, not just where you sit, mate. And you know, the experience is like revolutionary. And I think there's something like that about woodworking where it's a very, I mean, we talked about things needing different timelines, but it's a very interesting process of like, you can see some people go through developmental stages where they arrive week 1, and because there are saws, they ask to make a go-kart. And because we start to facilitate it, you know, we don't go like, no, that will take too long. You just go, okay, cool. Just let me know when you've had enough, because this is quite a big project, or whatever else. And that, like, understand, like, it's like it's not metacognition. But it's like knowing yourself.
And time. Because you, again, from an adult perspective, you have a very good understanding of time because you've lived longer.
Yeah.
And for a child, and it's so hard to imagine that, to imagine yourself not being able to understand time. And woodwork is such a great way of gaining a concept of time in relation to you. Like, how much can I do in a certain amount of time? What does my body feel like after doing this for a certain amount of time? What is the end result after doing it for this amount of time? Oh, hang on, you know. And I can remember my own childhood and like projects like that kind of, and it's sort of like almost like a horrible feeling. It's like deflating because you've got this incredible, like, you've built this castle out of wood and you can climb it and it's incredible. And then little by little, as you start doing the project, the concept that, you know, the awareness of it kind of hits you and you're like, oh. But it is also empowering because once you have that internalized, then you have an awareness of your own ability in that time.
Well, it's a really good example of, you know, we've talked on so many episodes now about, like, you let people fail. And I don't think this is an example of letting people fail, but it's an example of, like, letting people get frustrated or letting people, like, come to their own realization or make their own in the way that you and I could step in and could make a go-kart. If we went, right, okay, head down, I'm going to make this go-kart for you. You sit by and you pass me the tools. We could make a go-kart, right? We're competent enough. But, and then it leads me to thinking about when you prepare resources, what level do the children or the learners arrive at? Do they arrive at wood cookies? Do they, because sometimes that's appropriate, where you go, if you're in a school setting, you might go, look, we've done wood cookies 18 times, but actually what they want to make is cars. So they don't all need to come and cut 4 wood cookies.
So I did it at home with a...
So I did it with a bandsaw and I just... But sometimes you need to go, I think I might have done, you know, sometimes I watch stuff I've done and I've gone, I did too much there. They have just...
I know.
And interesting again, when I feel shortchanged. I don't know if you've had this, where there's part of a project, and so it's like steps 1, 2 and 3, and I go, step 1 is going to be way too tricky, so I'll tell you what, I'll do step 1 and you can do 2 and 3. And then you do step 1, and then because the dawning realization of, like, for the child or the learner, steps 2 and 3 are actually quite hard, they just go, I think I'm actually fine with it at just step 1, and they run off with, like, whatever you've made. You're like, oh, that wasn't part of the bargain, you, like... You know?
I'm sure there's a load to be said about, like, ownership of a project and, like, physically handling somebody else's work. And there are theories about this, aren't there, about, like, you do not touch it. You can talk it through and you can say, and you can maybe show them on your example one, which is what I quite like to do in woodwork, is I'll go,
I'm going to make one too. That's a good way.
Or, like, I'm going to cut a bit of wood the same size as yours, so that then I can show you the thumb push on my bit without touching yours. And I find myself even, like, taking somebody's work from them to show them the physical position the hands would need to be in and the angle, but I'll say, I'm not going to do it for you, but here is what you are going to do, there you go, type thing. But even, like, I'd love to be able to get to a point where you don't even touch their project. I think that would be really...
But that's
really
about the
lovely
project choice and about the timelines that you've got, and about,
of course,
again, that forest school thing of it needs to be long term is partly so that you can have that repeated, like, it took me 3 months to make I keep going back to go-kart, that's the idea that's in my head, but there's so much more to that than, I tightened the bolts at the end and
Well,
then we've got a
exactly.
go-kart. It's a very different
Yeah.
experience.
And also, it's one of those things where you don't really feel the emotions of the learner unless you've done it yourself. So the reason that I have been thinking about physically handling or doing something on someone's project is because having been on like whittling courses, forest school kind of meetups where we've done Skillshare and things like that, and people have helped me out with spoon making, for example.
Yeah.
And sometimes have taken my project and gone, oh, I'll do this bit for you. And so I can remember within, the last 4 years, I have that experience of having had that happen to me in a learning situation. And so I can remember the emotions that go with that. So
you know how much I try really hard not to take rope off you? Can you feel it when I'm like... Because sometimes I feel myself walking towards you to help with knots.
Yeah.
And then I either have to beeline or I have to still go, "You're right. Are you all right with that one?"
Well, good.
I really...
Because do one. Yeah, so, and it's like a weird mixture, I don't know, from my personal experience of the woodworking thing, when someone takes my project, is like relief, because you go, that person knows what they're doing, and so probably my project is going to turn out better now that they're taking control of this bit that they've told me is tricky and I can see is tricky. And so, phew, I'm really glad. At the same time as, that's kind of my thing, that you're kind of touching and doing something and maybe I didn't quite want it.
And it will feel weird when you take it home if anybody compliments that particular bit.
Yeah.
Or says wow, that's real,
Yeah. So kind of remembering all those feelings firsthand quite recently, I think is quite a powerful weapon in your armoury as a practitioner. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like having gone through, it's not necessarily that you have to make the same thing as that person is going to make and go, oh, well, I know about this because I've made it recently, but you've been in the position of a learner quite recently. So I would definitely recommend, if anyone was like looking to do more woodwork or whatever with a group, to try and find a bit of training themselves. Yeah, similarly that I went on a course about engraving letters in wood.
Oh yeah.
And that was really fascinating. It was all blokes and they were just so nonplussed at me being there. They were just so freaked out that there was somebody with a vagina in their presence. Honestly,
how were you carving these?
How was I exactly? Well, my vagina was really, really prevented me from handling the tools properly. Yeah, so that was interesting.
And so, did you get lots of in that experience? Do you think you got more work? Like not work. Do you think more stuff was taken away from you?
No, that was okay. They were actually fine in that regard, but they were like, just in terms of me being a learner in there, they were just like, oh, okay, we need to like talk to you about what you look like and how old you are and things like that at the same time as working, which is weird. It was just weird, but yeah. It was ultimately, it was good. What I'm saying is learning experiences where you go maybe a little bit out of your comfort zone. You go, oh yeah, I know I've done loads of whittling, but I haven't worked with chisels before. I'm going to find a little.
Well, that kind of leads on to, doesn't it? Like talking about practitioner development in terms of woodworking is something that, like, well, as you've highlighted, woodworking has lots of connotations around it.
Yeah.
In terms of gender, in terms of class, in terms of, I don't know that I've looked into it, but I would imagine, ethnicity and for lots of people, the neurodiversity aspects of woodworking, that, we talked about the risks, and so people will be more hesitant with a group of neurodiverse learners and go, woodworking's not something we can involve as much, and, might move those things away from. But there's so many routes now to build up a base of knowledge around woodworking that are, digital courses and stuff, and books are ways that they don't, as long as you can access those materials, it will increase your practitioner Rolodex of ideas or of techniques.
Yeah. And time, like, if the world was as we wanted it to be, it's hard. But some of these books, like I'm just flicking through Richard Irvine's Forest Craft, a child's guide to whittling in the woodland, which is really beautiful. If you haven't got it, like, definitely recommend. And if you had the time, just as an adult, to just pick a project and just do it for your own enjoyment. Because I think through doing one project, you learn a lot of techniques that are then transferable to other projects. So if, you've made the fairy furniture in the book yourself, mini furniture, and then a child has a project that's kind of similar, and you go, yes, I did this kind of technique, and you can show them, not on their work but on your own work, and do you know what I mean? And also get used to like the tactile feeling of the wood and all that kind of stuff.
Support the podcast today by becoming a Patreon member at childrenoftheforest.com. Check out the podcast links for more details.
I wanted to talk a little bit about that actually, because yesterday had an interesting thing, and this kind of ties into the gratitudes that we've started to really focus on with our group. So a child said, can we go and cut some wood? And I was like, okay, what wood, what for, what do you want? Mm-hmm. And they were like, I just want to like make a thing, and I just need to cut a tree, and so I think we should probably take the axe. And I was like, okay, can you again, peeps, like, probably not going to cut down a tree today. What is it that you actually like? What kind of size of wood are you thinking you need? And
it was a sword, wasn't it? It transpired he needed like a sword or a weapon.
It was a weapon of some kind that he hadn't quite designed yet. So fair enough, he hadn't quite narrowed it down. Yeah. He had that feeling of like needing to hold the thing.
It was going to be a 50-foot sword though, wasn't it?
It needed to be longer and stronger, but not as heavy and all this kind of thing. And I kind of like looked around and I was like, there's actually quite a lot of branches around at the moment. It's been quite stormy. There's quite a lot of stuff that fell down and has been tidied away, or like, you know, let's maybe look at being absolutely sure that there isn't a piece of wood that is the magical right dimensions, weight, all the rest of it before we go and harm a tree. And so that was quite an interesting discussion to have. It kept going back to, can we just go and cut it? Because I just feel I'd feel happier if we just go and cut it. It's like, I'm just gonna push you there. let's just try. How about this piece? Let's have a look at this. And that sustainable aspect of it was interesting. And also we were trying to make elder whistles yesterday, and the kind of variability of natural green material. That's another huge like learning point, isn't it? That you can go, we can follow all the steps in a book or in my head because I've done this before, and sometimes even though I've made 10 whistles in my life, sometimes it just won't work, and there's so many natural variations to that, and variations in the the cuts that you've made, the how wet the wood is, all of those kind of things. There is like a nature connection element as well, which is so magical, because if you've done even something as simple as using a bow saw on different types of wood, some that have been cut for ages, some that you've just cut which is a different species, all of that stuff is so like comment worthy. The saw's really sticking in this wood. This is actually tougher than that piece we cut last week. How about that? And
that's also one of the things that I guess keeps lots of people who have green woodworking as a hobby, because there are lots of groups springing up around the country, particularly for like retired people. It's like green woodworking, whittling groups, carving groups, these kind of things.
There's an online one as well, which is based in America, and I follow them but haven't ever engaged with them. I'm sure you could find it if you googled it, because they do like a spoon club, but it's all virtual, all online, and you can access it from wherever, and they'll post some patterns. Rise Up and Carve, that's what it's called.
Okay.
So they'll do like a Rise Up and Carve challenge, and you can share your work and use the templates that people put up, and it's a really lovely supportive community. Lots of female woodworkers in there, lots of younger people, lots of people going, this is so welcoming, it's so refreshing, because there's no judgment.
But also I think one of the things that works well with natural materials as opposed to like planed boards or pre-cut timber, things like that, one of the things that makes it different is when you there's two ways of looking at this. One is that like it's infinitely variable, so it's infinitely interesting, that you could carve the same spoon 200 times because the wood is always different. Even the same species of wood is always different. You're always going to find like a different little knot. The other way of looking at it is that when you see online somebody's carved from the same pattern a spoon that looks different, better, whatever than yours, you've got a little out to be like, their wood was probably better.
Oh, completely.
Their knife was different to mine.
Completely. And that's the thing, and that's what I think makes it actually really accessible to everybody is that you can blame that, you know. It's like if something fails, it isn't just what you have done. It's like,
it's a collaborative project between you and the wood.
Yeah, that bit of elder just didn't want to be a whistle today. There's nothing you could have done about it. You did it all, you know. It's not like you missed that step out or you did that wrong. It's like, well, and I just think that's a really humbling but not too harsh experience, if you know what I mean. It's like, okay, well, the universe didn't want that to happen, but it's not like I can beat myself up about.
And a great experience for learners to see you as a leader being fallible.
Yeah.
And being, you know, we had some issues with whistles yesterday, and I had multiple times where I just had to go, I don't know, I cannot make this bit, you know, well, can you do it? Yeah, no, this is, and which was interesting is I had a few experiences yesterday. So one was whistles where this learner was going, can you just make it work? And I was going, no, everything I've done up to now has been me absolutely 100% trying to make it work. None of this is an act, right? But I also had it where we did the tug of war, and it was 13 children trying to move me on the tug of war, and they moved me, you know, relatively easily. And at the end, one of them came up to me and went, I know you weren't doing your full strength. And my ego went, yes! And then I went, no, I really was, mate. That was me, like 100%. Can you see this gouge in the floor, in the dirt? That's where my foot went about, my foot went about 12 inches into the ground because I was trying not to move, and you still moved me. This isn't an act, you know.
Yeah.
Being holistic and human is part of woodworking, to just go, we're not going to make the same thing.
Yeah.
And children, and if we take it back to, like, because obviously when you talk about woodworking, people imagine, you know, benches, big projects with nails and screws and clockwork things going off. But box lashing 2 sticks together to make a sword is woodworking. And again, has that, like, instant variable of, like, I remember this really good, and that's, you know, if you talk about DT for GCSE, it's like, oh, how to choose your material. And, like, if you want to really start planting that seed, let kids make swords and let them play with swords and, like, beat the hell out of each other with swords. That's not what I mean. You know, test their swords to breaking point so that they then go, I had a really dry stick last time and it snapped. Or, you know, we used that to make the ladder to the treehouse. Or we used that as a, I don't know, a jump rope and it split, or as a box. And
isn't it interesting how some learners get amazingly attached or drawn to a particular stick? We've had it with so many different people that sometimes they like arrive with the stick they found somewhere else, and they're just really drawn to this particular stick, about the shape or the
there's some
feel
sticks
of
that
it.
have gone backwards and forwards from people's homes, I reckon, for a month, maybe more.
And like, oh, this is my special stick, and sometimes it has been worked in some way, like whittled, or something's been tied onto it, but sometimes it just hasn't. Sometimes it's just in its natural state, but it's really special. And this isn't just toddlers, this is like learners of all all ages, up to 12, whatever. This is my special thing. And then it's either got lost in the woodland because it's brown, and there are quite a lot of other sticks here. What? And so the trauma of going through that, but I've lost sparkle stick or whatever, giving it a name, all of that stuff, and the trauma of that. I've spent a long time working on this, and then I tested it out, and then it snapped. Yeah. And the trauma of that. And I just find that I find it so interesting about, like, what sparks that emotional connection. It's like, that thing was alive. Yeah. That is a thing that was alive, almost like that thing of all objects kind of having a spirit in them, And it's almost like some children can still see that, and adults, it's not accessible anymore. Do you know what I mean? And it's almost like now for an adult, like, I would have that spiritual, you could call it, connection with some spoons that I've made. And I was talking with this with my friend who does the wood turning with bowls last week. I was saying, so here's some spatulas that I made. These are 2 spatulas. One of them I've got a real spiritual connection with. The other one, I'm not going to throw it in the bin, but I just don't have that, And one brings me joy, one doesn't. For you, which of these would bring you joy? Can you...
Were you hoping that he would say the one you didn't like?
I was really interested to see what... And basically, he couldn't tell. He was just like, well, I guess the benefits to this one are blah. And we were talking about the centre of gravity. And so trying to work out, like, why would one thing speak to you more than the other? But I wonder if, like, for children, that affinity, that kind of, like, it brings me joy, exists for something that hasn't been manipulated at all. It's just I found a thing. I guess that still is for adults actually, like pebbles on the beach. There are definitely, if my house burnt down, the things I would save are some pebbles that I found on the beach. Like,
really?
because I've got some really, really. Lewis is looking at me.
You've
like,
got children.
What?
Why are you saving pebbles?
No, after living things, you know.
Being facetious. Yeah.
But,
okay.
So I guess that still exists. Okay, yeah. So those children are feeling the same kind of like spiritual connection to a stick as I would feel towards a pebble that I find on a beach and I go, I've got to keep this. I've got to keep my pocket for quite a long time and fiddle with it. And then after it's been in the pocket for a while, then it can go on the windowsill. And it's about whether it goes on the kitchen windowsill or the bathroom windowsill.
There's something about scarcity in our brains in that I think that the resource that is good is so valuable, and the reason I think that it doesn't go away, in fact it probably becomes, it becomes that thing where like teenagers might have a walking stick even though they have no need for a walking stick, they just have a walking stick, is because through trial and error they've learnt how valuable this stick is, that is light and strong and straight. But it takes some process of like, I was attached to that stick and then it broke, I was attached to that stick. And so when you find when you find a pebble that's perfectly smooth, you know how rare it is. It's just like a rarity thing.
Do you think?
Could be. We've wandered slightly off woodworking
but this is
now.
the most important. This is the most interesting part of this whole podcast for me right now.
Talking about your pebbles.
Yeah. No, the spirituality of sticks. I'm completely fascinated by it. I think what I'll do, right, is next time a child arrives with a stick that they found somewhere else and they go, check out my stick, I brought this special stick, I'm going to go, right, sit down, and I'm going to interview them. I'm going to grill them. I'm going to ask them every question about that stick. I'm going to record it, and then I'm going to write a book about it. I'm obviously not going to do that, but that's what I feel right now.
Yeah.
I feel very, very interested in it. Can I tell you something? I'm really, the person's parent might be listening to this might reach back to the child, so maybe don't tell the child if you're the parent listening to this, but somebody turned up with a special stick yesterday that they found somewhere else. Yeah. And it had some wool tied around it, so it was identifiable. Yes. And at the end of the day, this person was playing, like the last kind of hour of the day, was playing with another person, and they really linked really closely. They were really playing this like such lovely, just joyful play together. Yes. And they both were like, oh, I really enjoyed that lovely play. And it was home time, and so the person who bought the stick couldn't find the stick, quite upset about the stick. Yeah. While looking for the stick, the other person who they had been playing with had decided to bring the embers of the fire back to life. No. Oh my god, that's incredible. So it was like, and I was kind of going, it's home time. It's home time. We're all leaving now. And this person was just like blowing on the embers of the fire, only after that person finally went, okay, I am going now. Bye, Gemma. Just to let you know, the fire's going again. Bye. See you next week. Walked off. So everyone's left, and I look at the fire. Oh god. And the reason the fire is going is because the stick with the wool on it is there. Oh no. That is why you couldn't find the stick. But I was so glad that, in a way, that discovery wasn't made. Oh yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's like, and just to round off your day, this person that you've just found as a new play buddy has just burned your special spiritual stick. And on that note, we'll see you next week, guys. But that's life. That's life. Isn't that life? Bye. Bye.
If you like this podcast and want to support more episodes, you can donate through Patreon. Visit patreon.com/Children of the Forest to show your support for the Forest School podcast.